Hello and welcome to this week's IG Live. Today we are going to be talking to Stephanie Johnson of Schoolhouse Rap, and she is an educator and an expert on how to use diverse books in the classroom. So we're going to be talking to her about why that's so important, why she's so passionate about it. Hello. And also about how it can be done easily. She said a lot of teachers maybe get held back by the fact that they think it's going to take a lot of work or to either find the books or figure out how to incorporate them into lesson plan, which is something that she does a lot of work of providing those resources for educators. So we're going to talk to her about it and maybe some of the perceived barriers to using diverse books in the classroom and how she shows that we shouldn't let that stop us and why it's so important for kids to have access to these diverse books. And as you know, we come to every week, usually at 1 o'clock Eastern, with a little dose of positivity and inspiration for your day. We sometimes talk about things like diverse books and literacy. Hello. As we're doing today, sometimes it's practical tips for you and your family. And our families and in our communities. So as I said, today we're going to be talking about diverse books in the classroom and why we should do it and how. Hello.
Hi,
So good to see you.
same here. It's good to see you.
And thank you for taking the time to talk with us today. This is a topic that's so important and that we feel very passionately about. But first, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Well, my name is Stephanie Johnson. I am an educator of 20 plus years, but I also create lesson plans and writing units where we use diverse books.
Yes. So let's talk about that. Where does your passion for diverse books come from?
Oh my goodness. First of all, they're just beautiful.
Yes.
Diverse picture books are just pretty. But I think the other thing that kind of guides me is that we always talk about having global citizens, raising global citizens in terms of our students and our children. But then what do we really use as resources in order for them to have access to that? So my passion comes from I'm trying to reach as many kids as possible and expose them to as much literature that they can be connected to from around the world.
Mm.
So
I love that. That's beautiful. Like you said, I mean, we talk about how we want to raise our children, but then is that actually what we're doing in the classroom? And I mean, you have so much experience in the classroom. What are some of the benefits that you've seen about using diverse books that you've actually experienced?
I think the biggest is building empathy.
Mm.
When kids can see that other people are also going through the same things that they're going through, or maybe they don't know of another situation, but we can kind of put ourselves in that character's
Right.
shoes, and then it's a good way to just build empathy. Along with empathy, it's just a lot of other character traits. I love teaching. I think teachers are so used to having a scripted program for character education, and we really don't need that. You can just get a good picture book and teach character education
Right.
and cover that alongside teaching cause and effect, main idea. So that's probably my biggest benefit, is that I can also teach reading strategies, but then I can hit some character education traits and character strengths along with those books. And then it's not very preachy. You know how sometimes you may get a book and it comes off kind of preachy, but when
Right.
you get a picture book and you can have those discussions, I think the kids learn a lot more from that.
Mm. Right. They get caught up in the story, and so it
Right,
doesn't feel as right. Yeah, that
right.
that
You can
makes a
make
lot
more
of
of a
sense.
connection.
And so you're not only a teacher with, as you said, more than 20 years experience in the classroom, you also have a master's in curriculum and instruction. And one of the things that you spend a lot of time about doing is designing picture book units. Can you tell us about those and maybe give us some examples?
Yes. I believe that if you don't know by the end of this interview that I am totally against scripted programs, you will. I think that all we really need is a good book.
Mm.
Um, And that's what I try to do. I try to pick a good picture book in terms of what is it that I want to, or want my students to learn. So is it something like cause and effect? Is it something like drawing conclusions? Something that will lend itself through the storyline, for that strategy. But then I also like to pull in things like, it could be the character traits. Most picture books will lend to some sort of character trait, whether it's empathy, love of learning, appreciation of beauty. So I try to make sure I put that in my lessons as well. Vocabulary, you can find good picture books with vocabulary that kids will learn in context. So I just try to when I look at my standards, I just try to find a book and incorporate everything that I can using that one book. So you kind of do like a deep dive using
Right.
one piece of literature.
Right. And so with that, are there some picture books that you especially love to use? Is that too hard of
Oh,
a
let's
cry?
see.
When I sent you that question, I thought that's gonna be really hard. Or maybe some new
That
ones
is,
that you've just recently discovered, or some favorites that you have.
you know, one is, but it was released, I believe, in January, but I'm in the process of creating a unit as I go through. When I create a unit, I kind of introduce pieces of it with my classroom. So it's
Mm,
the Coretta Scott King autobiography.
mhm,
We just finished up the autobiography, or not biography, it was a biography written by Malcolm X's daughter.
mhm,
So when I saw this, my kids know tons and tons of information about Dr. King, but not so much about his wife.
mhm,
So when I found that book, I'm like, oh, this is going to be good. So I've been slowly introducing that to my kids. And then my favorite book as of right now, well, I guess for the past few years, has been The Day You Begin. I love that book. Oh my gosh, it speaks to my soul. So we usually read that at the beginning of the school year. And it's funny because most of my students can connect with that book, so they always bring it up throughout the school year. So that's one of my favorites,
mhm.
but I have so many more in the wonderful world of picture books.
I'm sure. I'm sure. I'm sure you know so many, and I wonder how do you find these new picture books? I mean, because you seem to be really aware of like in the new ones that are coming out. How do you find them? Because that's something that I think teachers can use um, you as a resource for, is if they're looking for diverse books. You put out so many great lists of them. But so where do you find them?
Oh my goodness, all over. I guess my best resource has actually been social media.
Um,
I subscribe to a lot of the different publishers.
mm-hmm,
And so as the books come out, they'll let you know when certain books are coming out. And so I'll put it on I have an ever growing book list on Bookshop of things that I'll purchase.
mm-hmm,
That's pretty much my vice. And so I try to buy a couple at a time. But that's probably my best source. My other source would be just talking to my local librarian, or I have a good friend who's a media specialist at a elementary school. So just people who also talk books. You
mm-hmm.
just kind of maneuver in that circle, and then you'll find out what's coming out. And
I
it's so many. It's so many. It's hard to keep up.
I love that you mentioned librarians and media specialists. They are such great resources, and I feel like they're underused. So
They
I love that you brought that up. And so you spend a lot of time, in addition to the work in the classroom and creating these units, you also present to other educators about using diverse books. So I'm curious, what kind of feedback do they give to you? Like, what are some of the questions they have, or the barriers that they face? Why aren't more teachers using diverse books in their classrooms?
I think there are two barriers that I can think of. One would be access.
Mm,
Um, books are expensive. They are really expensive, and when you're trying to grow your library, it's hard to just say, okay, there are 20 new books that are coming out that you want to introduce to your children, but you can't buy them all. So I talk to educators in terms of, make sure you use your local librarian. They are there to help you. Even if that library does not have the book, they can get it from another library. So go in, have a relationship, form a relationship with that librarian so you can have access to books. And the other thing that'll help you with is finding those new books, because if you build that relationship, she'll be like, hey, Miss Johnson, such and such author has released another book. Would you like me to check it out for you? So that's probably the biggest barrier, is just acquiring the books. And then the other issue, I think, is teachers are afraid to read certain books, to their students in the classroom. So the way I feel, I always tell my teachers that you have to ask parents and you have to ask administrators, what is it you want from your children? Do you want to build critical thinkers? Do you truly want a global citizen? Are we trying to build a global community? And if so, I promise you, this is the best way to do it. I think a lot of times teachers are afraid that parents are going to feel like they're indoctrinating or trying to convert, and that's not it. This is the best way to produce a critical thinker, is to give them literature that shows them multiple perspectives, or at least a perspective that is different from their own.
Right. Well, actually, that leads right into my next question, because I know you have talked a lot about the dangers of banning books because it's so important for kids to have access to these diverse stories. Do you have any advice for teachers who are facing pushback from parents or from their administrators about using certain books, especially diverse books in the schools?
Yeah, that's definitely it, is that you approach both your parents and your admin in terms of, we are supposed to be building critical thinkers. It's not that I read a book, or I have students have access to a book and I'm trying to change thinking. It's just a matter of, here is the information. What can we glean from the information? And this wasn't necessarily from a picture book, which I'm waiting for it to be put out, but my class learned about the Memphis 13, and we talked about whether or not African American parents should have let their children integrate, these schools. And so I had a different opinion from all of my kids. I didn't have a class that fully agreed yes. I didn't have a class that fully agreed no. It was like, here were the facts. They listened to the interviews from some of the kids who are now adults, and then they took away from that what they took away from that. So I just don't believe you can produce a critical thinker without having multiple perspectives.
And
even as adults.
Grade is that?
Third.
I love that you're talking about this in third grade. That's amazing. And
yes.
I'm sorry, I
It's
interrupted
funny
you.
because I always say, no, that's okay. If you want to know how to solve the world's problems, ask an 8 or 9-year-old. They are so, it's like you sit back and you're like, I truly did not think about it that way. But they have opinions and perspectives that are valid.
Yes, I love that, and I think that that we don't really give them enough credit. We think 8 or 9, they're not old enough to give us any any insights, but that's amazing. What can you give us some examples? What are some other kind of discussions or things that you've talked about with your students, either books that you read or just about something else?
We just finished up Stamped for Kids. And so the project for that book is, we're going to make an ABC book based on some of the vocabulary we're going to pull out of the book. And it's amazing how, like, from the first chapter, from the book that was written that told all the lies about African Americans, some of the questions that my kids are coming up with, I'm like, I never thought about it that way either. I don't know why. But then as we started to continue reading through the book, and something else may come up, and a kid may say, well, what difference does it make if they feel that way, or if they write a book about it? We don't have to believe it. And then I'll have another kid that'll say something like, well, words matter. And I'm like, okay. So it's just, I don't think there are topics that you really have to stay away from. It's just, again, you present the information, you present what has happened, whether it's history or something that's going on currently, and kids will come up with their own opinions. They'll come up, they can debate at that age. It's just amazing what they can do is when you can expose them to different things.
I love that. And that goes also back to the importance of picture books, because I think sometimes if people do want to approach a topic with a child, say who's 8 or 9, they're not really sure how to do it in an age appropriate way, where picture books have such a great way of presenting it.
Oh my gosh, that is so true. I feel the same way. You can, if you have a topic that you know you want to touch on with your children, and it's like, oh, I really don't know. I promise you, there's a picture book about it. There is a book that you can use to kind of ease your way in, and then it'll open up the door to these magnificent conversations that you can have with kids, you know. So they're out there.
Yeah, and I do want to mention again that you have part of the resources that you provide is you have these wonderful book lists. Maybe you could talk a little bit just briefly about what kind of resources you offer and how people can find them.
Well, I have most of my lessons on Teachers Pay Teachers. But you can also, like, I give a lot of my lessons away for free. Like, if I get too excited about something and before I make it all polishy for Teachers Pay Teachers, I usually will just send it out to my email list. So that's probably where you can get most of my lessons and book units, via that way.
And how do people sign up for your email list?
Um, I have my website. It's schoolhouserap.net. And as soon as you log on, you can sign up right there with your name and your email address. And then I try to send out something weekly, and if not weekly, every couple of weeks. Because it's like if I'm doing it in my classroom, you'll have access to it as well.
I love that. That's such a great resource. And again, that's schoolhouserap.net. And you also have the link in your bio that from there you can get to the Teachers Pay Teachers and all of the resources that you provide. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. This is so fun.
Yes, thank you for having me.
And again, if you are joining us late, this is going to be up in a few minutes on Instagram, later on our YouTube channel. And thanks to everybody who dropped by today.
Thank you.